is an urban legend that originated in Scotland. It revolves around the ghostly figure of a little girl known as the White Death. No one knows if this tale is true or fictional, but it is quite famous and is often retold as a legendary horror story. The White Death is the spirit of a little girl who lived in Scotland. This girl, whose name is never mentioned, was very unhappy in her life. She felt so alienated and unwanted that one day she decided to end her own life. In death, she became even more dangerous and terrifying than before. The White Death is often described with varying elements, but one consistent theme is a deep feeling of self-hatred, which then transforms into hatred for others after her death. This little girl is depicted as someone who felt very neglected and unwanted by those around her. Perhaps she came from an indifferent family, or experienced rejection from friends. This indifference and rejection made her feel worthless and unloved. The girl may have experienced violence or mistreatment, both physically and emotionally. This constant mistreatment caused her to resent herself, feeling that she was worthless, or even deserving of such treatment. Loneliness was her only companion in life. She felt very alone, perhaps even believing that no one could understand or listen to her. This loneliness may have led to feelings of inferiority and self-hatred, as if she was solely responsible for her sadness and suffering. All these negative feelings, neglect, deep self-hatred, and hopelessness seemed to coalesce into a sense of despair. She may have seen herself as the source of all her problems, or felt that she did not deserve happiness or love. Eventually, this self-hatred drove the girl to end her life. However, death did not end her suffering. In some versions of the story, it is said that her self-hatred was so strong that it transcended death, transforming her into a vengeful spirit known as the White Death. The death of the little girl known as the White Death is a tragic event shrouded in an aura of horror and mystery. This story, often told with sinister details, reinforces the horror elements within it. The girl's body was found in a terrible condition. Her face was said to show an expression of deep pain and fear, reflecting the emotional and physical suffering she endured before her death. Her body may have already started decomposing, suggesting that she had been dead for some time before being discovered. This ghastly state added a layer of horror to the tale. After her death, the story continues with supernatural elements. It is said that the girl's soul could not rest in peace because of her deep self-hatred and the suffering she experienced. This turned her into the White Death, a vengeful spirit. This transformation is often described as a sinister process, wherein her hatred became so intense that she became an entity seeking to spread her suffering to others. As the White Death, her hatred was directed not only at herself, but also at others. She felt that others should not know about her suffering and grief, perhaps because she believed they didn't care when she was alive. This resentment may have stemmed from her desire to conceal her suffering, or from envy that others were not experiencing the same misery. The White Death then became an entity that punished those who learned of her existence, possibly as a way to prevent the spread of knowledge about her tragic and sorrowful life story. This can be seen as a manifestation of her deep hatred, both towards herself and the world she considered indifferent to her suffering. The legend says that if someone becomes aware of her existence, the White Death will come to brutally kill them. This adds an element of horror, as she not only takes a person's life, but also erases their memories and existence from this world. It reflects her desire to forget her own pain and ensure that no one knows about her suffering. She didn't want anyone to know about her because she felt that by knowing of her existence, they would also know of her deep sadness. The White Death is depicted as a pale-looking figure with completely white eyes. She comes knocking on the door of the house of anyone who knows her story, knocking one door at a time. With each knock, she gets closer. If someone opens the door, she will kill them. Her appearance in Scottish urban legends is often described in frightening detail as she approaches her victims. Sudden changes in temperature often accompany her arrival after someone learns about her. One of the most distinctive signs of the White Death's presence is the sound of repeated knocking on doors. The first knock is usually heard on the front door or gate, gradually getting closer. This is the first sign that the White Death has begun pursuing the victim. The next knock will be heard on an interior door, usually the door to a bedroom or another room closer to the victim. The final knock will be at the door of the room where the victim is located. At this point, the White Death is very close, and if the door is opened, she will enter and kill the victim. Her presence is often accompanied by a terrifying atmosphere. Often, the lights around begin to dim or go out, creating a darkness that heightens the fear. Shadows may appear to move in the corners of the victim's eyes, making them feel as if something is lurking in the darkness. The victim may hear faint whispers, malicious chuckles, or other inexplicable sounds, increasing their anxiety and fear. Its appearance is often shocking and sudden, adding an element of surprise and horror. It may suddenly appear in front of its victim, staring at them with its eerie white eyes. After appearing, the White Death is said to attack the victim with supernatural powers. Its attacks can be quite brutal, reflecting its deep hatred. In some stories, merely a touch from the White Death is enough to cause immediate death, while in others, it physically assaults the victim, causing severe injuries. The victims are said to die in a terrible way, with their bodies shattered and their faces twisted in expressions of deep fear. Harris once experienced the most terrifying encounter of his life, narrowly escaping death and the brutal attacks of the White Death. The sound of knocking on the door was like a small explosion in the silent middle of the night. Harris awoke from his sleep, startled by the sudden noise. His eyes were still half closed as he looked towards the front door of his house, listening intently. At 2 o'clock in the morning, there shouldn't be anyone outside. However, the knock sounded real, and his heart began to beat faster. Harris was a young man who lived alone in an old house on the outskirts of Edinburgh. That night, he had just come home from work and fell asleep immediately after a long day. His mind was still foggy, as he tried to recall a story he once heard about a little girl known as the White Death, a ghost searching for those who know about her. His voice trembled as he muttered her name inwardly, trying to convince himself that it was all just a story. However, a second knock sounded, louder and closer, this time from the living room door. Harris immediately sat up, his eyes wide open and his ears listening intently. Panic began to creep through his body. Harris tried to ignore the knocking, convincing himself that it was just his imagination. But when the third knock came from the bedroom door, he knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. This was not his imagination. Something or someone was approaching him, and he couldn't run. His hands trembled as he locked the bedroom door. He knew the story of the White Death, and he knew what happened after the final knock. When the fourth knock came, this time softer yet closer, Harris felt as if his breath was being held. The knock came from the bathroom door next to his room, just a few steps from where he stood. Harris took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He remembered that in horror stories, entities like these often have weaknesses. However, his mind was chaotic, unable to recall any details. Should he pray, close his eyes? He couldn't think clearly. At that moment, the lights in his room began to flicker. The room grew cold, giving him goosebumps. A final knock was heard, this time from inside his own room. Harris turned around and saw the slightly opened closet door. As if something had come out of it, he could feel its presence, cold and frightening. In the corner of his eye, he saw the figure of a little girl with empty white eyes staring at him. Her face was expressionless, yet her aura exuded a deep hatred. Harris felt his body freeze, unable to move or scream. The girl stood there, just a few meters from him. With all the courage he could muster, Harris ran towards the door of the room, trying to escape. But the door wouldn't open, as if it were locked from the outside. He felt an overwhelming fear as he heard the sound of small footsteps approaching. As if the girl was walking slowly towards him. In desperation, Harris grabbed the phone on his bedside table and began typing a message to his friend, hoping that at least someone would know what was happening to him. However, before he could finish the message, his phone died. He was trapped with no way out. The little girl was now standing right in front of him, her blank white eyes staring directly into his. He could feel the cold radiating from her body, creeping into his own, making it hard to breathe. In that moment, he felt that this was the end. However, suddenly, the girl spoke in a soft yet cold voice. The atmosphere became increasingly tense, and Harris felt like his heart was about to explode. But unexpectedly, the girl turned around and walked away. Harris stood frozen, unable to believe what he had just seen. The girl walked back into the closet. The door closing behind her with a quiet thud. The room suddenly became warm again, and the light stopped flickering. Harris stood there for several minutes, trying to comprehend what had just happened. He was alive. The White Death hadn't taken his life. However, he knew that this experience would haunt him forever. He soon left the house, never to return. He kept the secret, fearing that telling his story would summon the White Death once more. To this day, he never understood why the girl let him live. Had he shown enough fear? Or was there some reason he couldn't comprehend why the girl spared his life? Harris doesn't know, but one thing is certain: that night he experienced a fear that can never be forgotten. The knocking at night, the empty white eyes, and the feeling of freezing cold, all these will constantly haunt his mind, serving as a reminder of a horror that defies common sense. The story of the White Death is often told as a warning not to delve too deeply into things we don't understand, or to underestimate the grief and suffering of others. In some versions of the story, it is said that the White Death not only kills those who know about her but also destroys everything they have, including memories and records of their existence. This is to ensure that no one can learn about her grief and suffering, even after their death. This story, like many other urban legends, is often used to scare and offer a moral lesson. Although there is no real evidence of the existence of the White Death, the story remains a part of horror culture in Scotland and attracts the attention of many who love scary tales.